Look at that. That button means that we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's live stream. This is a really exciting one for me personally. I have two good friends of mine who are also colleagues. For those of you that don't know, my name is Mike Warner. I look after artist and label relations at Chartmetric. And today I'm joined by Rutger and Jason from Chartmetric as well. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey,
thanks, Mike.
What's up, Mike?
So good to have you here, especially given what's been happening in the last week with the 6MO just coming out. Is this actually the first place that you guys will be speaking about it as well?
It is.
Wow.
I think so, yeah.
I got the exclusive as well. Thank you so much.
You are now our Oprah Winfrey.
I'll take it. Look, before we get into it, if we could just get a quick little intro from each of you, tell us about your role within Chartmetric, and then we'll get straight into the 6MO as well. So, Rutger, if you would like to go first.
Sure, yeah. My name is Rutger. I am the digital strategy lead at Chartmetric, so a lot of digital marketing and a lot of content stuff. Jason and I work on content stuff together, and then we both work on how to communicate that, so to communicate numbers to you guys in a easy to package way, like I hope we have done with this report.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much. And Jason.
Yes. And on my side, Rutger and I do work side by side. My title is called Manager, Content, and Insights. I started with the company in late 2017, writing articles on our blog. And that has since grown into a podcast as well as these semi-annual reports that we do that we're about to talk about today, as well as special projects that I'll handle with customers who have needs outside of the regular Chartmetric app. And again, to the same goal, just trying to be that layer between the business side of what our clients deal with on a day-to-day basis, and then also the data side of things, the tech side of things, because we have a very talented team of computer engineers and data engineers and data scientists that are working really, really hard day in, day out to make a really good app experience. So I try to act as an intermediary in a variety of ways for the company and our clients.
Very cool. And you guys wear many more hats than what you just said as well.
And beanies, yeah.
And with that being said, let's start talking about the 6MO. And for anyone that doesn't know what 6MO is, it's the 6-month report that this is now the second report that is being put together, was just released this week and is online. For anybody that would like to look and follow along while we are discussing this as well, you can go to chartmetric.com/6MO. And that being said, tell us how this came about and let's get into it. Let's start nerding out.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll paint a broader picture real quick. The company had started in 2016, and it started out as a Silicon Valley startup where we were collecting a lot of data from streaming sites and DSPs as well as social media platforms and putting it all in one kind of dashboard. And so it's an application where people from labels, artist managers, artists themselves, digital marketers, people in the branding space, creative agency space, who just have like one foot or both feet in the music business and need to have more informed business decisions so they can make better deals and make better tour routing and those kinds of things. They went to Chartmetric to do that on a day-to-day basis. And so, while the app is still our bread and butter, we've been making more and more content to try to show the value of data and its application in a creative space like music, trying to meld the culture side along with the data side. And so we started this thing that is a semi-annual report called 6MO. And Rutger, you can talk more about that.
Yeah, so last year Jason had this idea to do this report because we have so much data, and it's what really matters is how to communicate that data, because numbers don't really mean anything if there's no analysis or narrative behind those numbers. So that was really what drove the idea for this report. So our first edition we released in the fall of 2019, where we looked at the 6-month period of January to June. And this report picks up where that report left off, basically. So from July to December of 2019, so the last 6 months of the year. And what we're really looking at is data performance for, we track 2 million plus artists. So we're looking at some 13 social streaming and other music related platforms. And we're trying to slice and dice that data in really interesting ways to give a snapshot of this 6 month period, which is what I hope we've done with this report. And just so you understand a general structure of it, it's really divided into 2 parts. So the first part, we look at Chartmetric rising artists. So we really wanted to focus on breakthrough artists, not necessarily just the superstars that everybody knows. We wanted to look at, who is gaining a lot of traction, who is maybe not headlining arenas on TikTok or Instagram or Spotify or Shazam. That was really our driving motivator for this section particularly, and for this report as a whole. And then the second section is the playlist ad awards. So we looked at who got added the most times for the first time to playlists on Spotify, Deezer, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. And that revealed some interesting things as well. Maybe not so many breakthrough artists as section 1, but there are some in there, and there are some trends that you can see for the DSPs writ large in that as well.
Awesome. So what I'd like to do, we were just setting up the screen share on the side as well. Jason, would it be okay if we put up your screen for everyone to see?
Absolutely, let's do it.
All right.
Sweet. So this is it. Let's show off the fancy cover. Yay. So this is, again, our second edition, H2 2019 from July to December 2019. For those of you following along, you'll see a note from our founder CEO, Sung Cho, just talking about a little bit about the history, but Rutger's already gone through that. For everyone who has a copy of this at home, please do feel free to click on all of these cool little things. There might even be an Easter egg in there somewhere that we've hidden. But we made this second edition a lot more interactive. So you can click out to a lot of really cool videos and tracks and a lot of these artists' websites, because we're just trying to, give some shine to these breakthrough artists that we really wanted to make a focus, as Rutger said, on this second edition. So I'll go ahead and talk about the first part. So it's this first section here, Chartmetric Rising Artists for the second half of 2019. And you'll see we have a bunch of different platforms here. So cross-platform performance, which we'll get into in a second. That's our own kind of ranking system. YouTube channel views. We have stuff from Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, Shazam, Bands in Town, Twitter, and Wikipedia. So those are the ones that we focused on this time around, because we added a few. TikTok is definitely one that grabbed a lot of attention so far, for obvious reasons, if you've been in the music industry. And so let's go ahead and take a look. So this first one right here, and I'll just give a really quick pass over of these, just so people can get into the details themselves. But just to give some background to some of these charts and some of the analysis that we have here. So this first one is a Chartmetric, our own ranking system. So essentially we have over 2 million artists that we track on our database. And our data scientists came up with a way to kind of synthesize a lot of these sources. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Wikipedia, Apple Music, Deezer, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Different metrics within each of those platforms, but essentially the ones that kind of had a balance of kind of reach and engagement, and synthesizing that in a way that was dynamic, day to day. So if your artist dropped a new album or had some crazy Twitter storm happen or something of a similar nature that either gathered or maybe even lost attention, the CPP ranking system will be able to pick up on that and be sensitive enough to it that in every 24-hour period, you can see that reflection. We track it over time. And essentially, it's a way to simplify a lot of the data that is available now in the music space, because it can be so confusing, because to have 20 different browser tabs open trying to track all these different things, sometimes you just need a simple kind of overview. And so that's the idea of CPP. And so you'll see here that we did a lot of these rankings in terms of gain. So we did it a little bit in the first edition. This time around, we really wanted to focus on breakthrough artists. So we focused not necessarily who was on top, but who gained the most within a certain threshold between July and December. And so you come out with a lot of really cool artists that, at least me personally, I was not aware of. For example, Bizarrap, who's a bedroom producer based out of Argentina. He's a low-key producer, but he makes all these really cool trap beats. And then a lot of like Latin rappers will just basically come over to his crib and flow over his beats. And so we talk a little bit about him, as well as a lot of these other artists that you see. Kim Loaiza is a Mexican artist who used to be a beauty vlogger. And so she gained a lot in the YouTube space. And so it reflected in her CPP ranking here as well. And you can click on any one of these names and, check out their profile on Chartmetric, and you can see kind of more story behind it. But that's essentially what we're doing in this first one. I'll go ahead and keep moving on. If anyone has any questions, please do feel free to leave one in the chat, and we'd be happy to get to them at the end, I think. Mike, do you want us to answer questions on the go, or do you want us to wait at the end?
You know what? This was actually a really good question that came in on LinkedIn. I couldn't put it up on the screen. Just for anybody that is tuned in on LinkedIn, we are seeing your comments. We just can't show them on the screen right now. But we did get a question come in. Jason, I'm assuming you saw the message.
Yeah.
Would you like to answer that question there as well?
Yeah, for sure. So we get our data from a variety of sources. Some of it from publicly available websites. Some of it is through an API. Some of it is through an agreed license paid source. So we have a lot of different data sources, 20 and over. So it depends on the platform, and it depends on probably the timing of it as well, because the methodologies have changed over time as things evolve and kind of we evolve as a company. It's essentially a mix of things. So you could find more information on help.chartmetric.com. We talk a little bit more about the time frame of a lot of these data sources and how far back we go and things of that sort. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's it. It's also a little bit beyond my pay grade because I am not a computer engineer, so I'm not exactly qualified to talk about Python scripts and so on and so forth. But essentially, it's a mixed bag of those three methods. To keep moving on, so here we have YouTube channel views gain. So obviously YouTube is arguably, one of the biggest music streaming platforms that we have in the world, period, even just on kind of name recognition alone, just because it's been around since 2005. And so here, we see names, some of which that we're very familiar with. For example, if you have a teenager at home, you're probably familiar with Ashniko. She put out this really big track on TikTok called Stupid, this anti-boyfriend anthem that kind of got really, really big in the second half of last year, and it reflected on her YouTube channel. She has these really, really just eye candy videos that have some really strong, fun, colorful, kind of scary too, imagery. But it's got a huge fan base, and you can really see that here. She went from just over 1.4 million channel views at the beginning of July to, by the end of 2019, getting up to over 50 million, which is pretty awesome. And then you see a lot of other ones that maybe you're not familiar with. For example, Midian Lima. Hopefully I'm not mispronouncing her first name too horribly, but she's a Brazilian gospel singer. This is, we've been seeing more and more Brazilian artists pop up on our radar from a data perspective, which really just goes to show just how awesome some of the music is down there, as well as how big the population is in Brazil as well. It's a whole other world that speaks Brazilian Portuguese. And so she popped up because she went from 3.2 million to over 54 million channel views on YouTube. also in the second half of 2019. You'll see a couple more names that you might recognize. Unfortunately, the Pop Smoke, who recently passed away, is also here as well, just showing some of the ridiculous. He gained over 1,000% percentage gain in YouTube channel views in the past, in the second half of last year, but unfortunately passed away in February. So, but it's a really interesting collection of artists that you see that really starts to talk about the kind of global nature of music today, and how it's really just not English speaking artists anymore, which is pretty cool. Keep moving on. Spotify monthly listeners gain. So this, if you're not familiar with Spotify monthly listeners, you've probably seen it within the app if you're a Spotify user. So essentially, this is a statistic where Spotify measures how many unique listeners listen to a certain track, playlist, or artist in the past 28 days. And it's a running tab. It doesn't matter how much a single user listens, but as long as they listen to said thing at least once. So essentially, it's kind of like how broad is your audience? How much reach does it have? And so in the second half of 2019, if you're familiar also with TikTok, the song Roxanne by Arizona Zervis, it hit number 1. So he went from a little bit over 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify to almost 27 million, which is over a 2,400 percentage gain, which is pretty crazy. Tones and I, of course, one of the star stories of 2019. The Australian singer-songwriter also came in at number 2. And then Burna Boy, which came in at number 3, which there was a Rolling Stone article by Elias Light that came out on Friday. Talked a little bit about him, and he hasn't really dropped any huge mega hits recently, but has been making really amazing kind of progress across several different platforms that has really shown him to be just like a slow and steady wins the race kind of artist, which, from our perspective is like a, Switzerland of sorts to the music industry. The slow and steady kind of wins the race, in terms of long-term artist progression seems to be like a really great way to grow a career, and Burna Boy seems to be a really awesome example of that, and you can see that here in the Spotify monthly listeners game. I'll keep it moving. Rucker, if I'm starting to get into your time, please feel free to ping me up. I don't want to eat too much into your time. But let me just keep going at this pace. Again, please feel free to drop any questions if you need to for everybody watching. So on Instagram, we have Instagram follower gain. So that should be obvious, Instagram being historically, in the past couple of years at least, it being such an amazing platform for a lot of music artists in terms of just showing their visual vibes and kind of like what their day-to-day life is, and a preferred way of fans to keep up with their favorite artists. So very popular medium that we covered in a series of articles we did called Trigger Cities that we published on our blog, which you can click through to here on the page. But essentially, you'll see how popular a lot of Latin artists are here in terms of how much followers they gained in the second half of last year. One of the interesting ones that really popped out to me was Nathaniel Cano. I think it's Cano.
Yeah, Cano.
Cano, thank you. So he's there's a lot of, I'm not that familiar with the style of corrido. But it's a traditional form of Mexican music, and I don't want to start talking out of turn, but it's a traditional form of Mexican music that he's kind of modernized, which is super cool.
Yeah, it's like folk, like a folk tradition, basically.
Gotcha.
And these days, like narco corridos are like folk traditions, sort of singing about narcos, really. It's narco traffickers as folk heroes.
Yeah, thank you. And from the few tracks that I heard of his, the sound seems still very traditional, but the look is really what struck me, because it looks like some like really modern, just like rap videos, with flat brim caps and chains and super cool cars. So that was like a really interesting kind of like vibe for me to learn about. And you can see it's very effective. He gained almost 400% Instagram followers in the second half of 2019, which was super cool to check out. But yeah, here's like another set of artists that if you're into Instagram a lot, this might be a really interesting kind of short list for you to check out. So here for TikTok counts, and by this we mean at the track level, because for this particular chart, we focus more on the tracks just because of the nature of TikTok. Kind of what tracks really popped in the second half of last year in terms of how many TikToks did it have at the beginning versus the end of the period. Now, this for this particular, data set, we started 1 month later in August. So August 1st, that was the beginning TikTok count for each track, and then December 31st being kind of like the latter for each of these tracks. Finetto by Chicago drill artist Chief Keef was the number one spot, which was interesting because the track came out in 2015 on World Star Hip Hop, but it just kind of got revived. If you go back to the track itself now on TikTok, there might have been a weird thing because I think Rolling Stone did an article where TikTok maybe removed a couple things and then put it back, and so the counts don't necessarily mesh up. But according to our records, he had a really huge gain, almost 9,000% in the second half of last year. Jump in the Line came in number 2, so this is like an old school Harry Belafonte. If you were in New York over the past few decades, this was a really big. Sorry if it's a little loud back here. There was a really fun bunch of TikToks that came out according to this song that he put out back in, I think it was 1961, and over 250,000 TikToks came out, and people were just using some of the fun little exclamations he would make in the song to match up with kind of like a funny kind of meme that a TikTok uploader would present. And it was just a really interesting way that catalog, even from the early 60s, kind of became relevant in 2019, which is really cool to see and probably really exciting for a lot of people on the label side working with the catalog. And then the third one was from Kane Brown, the country artist, who put out a song like a rodeo that became the soundtrack to a lot of TikTokers doing this crazy gymnastics move where, there'd be a couple and then one would toss the other one in the air and then do to the side, and it was very painful for a lot of people who did not successfully execute this gymnastics maneuver. But I'm assuming it was because it was almost like, being in a rodeo, and competing in one, even though the track itself is a ballad, from what I recall. So, just a lot of really interesting ways that TikTok as a medium is starting to flip songs and, users giving their own context to these songs and doing it in many times a fun way. So that's what you can see a lot of here. For Shazam chart occurrences, when you read this, that's probably going to be the hardest one to understand. So Shazam puts out a chart. If you go to shazam.com/chart, I believe, they have a top 50 at the city level for the people of that city, how many times they Shazammed a song. And so we focused on Mexico City just because it's, Spotify called it recently the streaming mecca of the world. There's so much consumption. We wrote a lot about it in Trigger Cities, our blog series. There's just a lot of streaming going on there. And so we decided to focus on it from a Shazam perspective. And so essentially all these artists that you see in front of you, these top 10, they had the most gain in terms of how many times they charted in the top 50 in Mexico City from the beginning of July to the end of December. I know it's a little bit much to kind of wrap your head around, but essentially we're just trying to measure what people in Mexico City were super curious about enough to them, take out their phone from their pocket, if they're at a bar, if they were at a sporting event, or even just a party, whatever, and they're trying to find out about a song that they're hearing in a very public space. And so, it usually tends to be a lot of the top 40 artists just because of the nature of its collection. You're not necessarily going to see a lot of super, super indie artists playing, over a basketball game or a soccer game. So you'll see things like, Maroon 5 is kind of like an obvious one, or The Weeknd at number 7 is another obvious one. Rucker happened to have found this Lou Bega song that he is a German artist and came out with his song Scatman and Hatman. Bit of maybe not for everybody, but it was a fun song and had over a 5,000% gain in terms of Shazam chart occurrences in Mexico City.
Yeah, if you're old enough to remember Mambo number 5 in the 90s, that was Lou Bega.
If you were so blessed.
And I was shocked actually to learn that he's a German artist, because I think a lot of people think he's a Latin, like some kind of Latin influenced artist, but he's German. Wow. Yeah, which was super interesting. But, he managed to, at least on Shazam in Mexico City, he managed to make a comeback by repurposing this Man John song into his own sort of. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I don't think we were able to figure it out, but I would love to see if there was like some kind of commercial campaign that maybe we just missed in the research, or so it was on some show, you know, it was over credits, or just something that really made people super curious about the song. But it's just really just kind of, it starts the investigation process. You know, we can't get all the answers just as a matter of time, but we try to, and that's what we try to do in the analyses here for you. But you see a lot of other acts too here that maybe you would expect. Bad Money from Puerto Rico shows up at number 10. Spanish speaker in the NWA shows up at number 3. And you can see that middle column is the most Shazam track out of all the tracks that they Shazammed with during this time period. So that's Shazam. So this is another new source that we featured in this second edition from Bands in Town. So if you're not familiar, Bands in Town is an app. It's based here in New York City, where Rucker and I are located. And they track trackers, is kind of their form of followers. And so if you're a fan and you want to follow your favorite artist on the app, you can track that artist. And so we can get those reflections. So these artists that you see here, this kind of top 10 short list, they're people who have gained the most Bands in Town trackers from July 1st to December 31st. The percentage gain, I guess, much more modest, I guess, in a way, but that was just also a nature of how we filtered it, because there's kind of a game we play, and it's a bit of a creative exercise where if you don't filter at all, you're going to get people with super low, you know, beginning scores and still super low ending scores. But, you know, if you go from 1 to 10, that's like, what, a 90% gain or something like that. So we're trying to show a happy medium that is not showcasing maybe people who are still at the beginning of their careers, but at the same time not showing super, super popular people where there's really not much insight to be gained. So we try to find that middle ground. Having said that, Billie Eilish is number 3. You know, we did uncover some really interesting ones. For example, 17, the K-pop band, came in number 2, gained over 34% Bands in Town trackers that we did not expect. Cuco, which I find super fascinating and fun to listen to. A Chicano singer-songwriter based out of, I think it's California.
I think it's LA.
Is it LA?
I'm pretty sure it's LA, yeah.
Yeah. So he's from Southern California and has a solid following. I mean, you know, he ended the year at just over 148,000, which obviously does not compare to Khalid or Billie Eilish, who are, you know, over 1 million. But I think it really just goes to show why it's important to focus on percentage gain as opposed to total counts, because I think, you know, for the 148 people that are tracking him, like, they go to his shows. I was doing some research on him, and there are some really strong fans who are probably, you know, also spending a lot of money not only on a ticket, but probably a lot of his merchandise and probably anything else that he chooses to do. So this was kind of a cool look from a live point of view in terms of kind of who was really, you know, doing really well in the second half of 2019. And I think this is the last one. No, I got 2 more. Okay. So Twitter followers. So obviously, the Twitter medium, which we're all familiar with, at least in America. We have Burna Boy, who came in number 1 with over 67% gain percentage-wise in terms of Twitter followers from the beginning to the end of the period. And like I said before, this is probably just another one of the mediums where he does really, really well in. Billie Eilish, again, number 3. Number 4 and number 5, and also, actually, no, I'm sorry, excuse me. Number 4 is a Turkish artist, Haluk Levent, I think is the right way to pronounce him. He is very much focused on Twitter in terms of humanitarian causes. He showed up in our first edition, also in the same metric Twitter follower gain. And then NCT 127, which is actually number, it's basically the small sub-teenage unit of NCT 27 is the K-pop group, and then NCT Dream is the subunit of a K-pop group. And so essentially they're 2 K-pop groups who are of the same family, but they have their own kind of careers and their own Twitter followings. And you see that here, and you see that they popped up in the first edition if you've seen it before. and they popped up again in the second one, which is really saying something about their growth, because to have that same kind of like, top growth from kind of like one time period and still continue that despite your higher kind of absolute count in the second part is it's pretty telling. So K-pop acts have usually done very, very well on Twitter. It's just a really hot medium for that particular genre of music. The fan base is just really, really super active on there and a couple other platforms. So it's really not surprising at all to see that happen here as well. And then last but not least, we have Wikipedia views gain. And this was really interesting because it happened to be, unfortunately, a lot of artists who have passed in the past 6 months, or in the last 6 months of 2019. So in a lot of ways, it measures kind of like the interest that happens when someone passes away for whatever reason, for unfortunate reasons. But it really kind of goes to prove how we've always thought of Wikipedia, which is kind of like this medium that measures like curiosity, like a really strong form of interest that really talks about, I don't want to just listen to your music or watch your videos. I want to know like who you are and where were you born and, how older you are and, what other things have you done in your life? And, obviously with the amount of people here, 7 out of 10 who had the most Wikipedia view gains in the past, in the second half of 2019, that was really what came out here in this particular short list. Is there anything you wanted to add to this, Rucker?
Yeah, I think it's also important to note with like the curiosity metric is that when we talk about percentage gain here, it's not necessarily like a steady growth. It's more like how big was the peak in curiosity? Were there multiple events during the 6-month time period that created these curiosity peaks that led to this total percentage growth, as opposed to like a steady, like Spotify followers, where you can have a steady, upward trajectory of followers. It's a little bit of a different pattern here.
Yeah. No, thanks for that.
I just wanted to add to that as well. My experience with Wikipedia is it's usually the first search result, even ahead of the artist's official website. So when you're looking at a new artist or you're wanting to find out more about them, usually the Wikipedia is top search result. And that will then in turn direct you to more information about the artist, their official website, sometimes even links to them on all the DSPs as well. So it really is a valuable metric in that regard, that you can see how many people are actively trying to find out more about this artist. Like, I guess the equivalent would be seeing how many people, when they're in Spotify, go to the about page on an artist and read their bio. In this case, we know how many people are looking at their Wikipedia and actually reading it as well.
Yeah. Cool stuff. But essentially that's it for the first part. Again, please just use this as a way to look at short list of people who are gaining a lot in these platforms. I think it's useful to use kind of a familiar top 10 kind of format, but kind of do it in a way that gives some shine to some people who are still on their way up.
Cool. So let's hop into part 2. Unless Mike, you have anything?
I'm good. I'm enjoying the pace of this. So let's keep rocking. Let's keep rocking and rolling.
Rocker, do you want me to roll these pages for you, or do you want to do it yourself? It's up to you.
Sure. Yeah, you can roll it if cool. Think that'll make it seamless. So now we're gonna sort of shift from social and music related platforms to like traditional DSPs. So we looked at Spotify, Deezer, Apple Music, and Amazon in terms of first-time playlist ads for certain artists on each of those platforms. So who had the most first-time playlist ads on each platform? We did the top 5 for each of these platforms, and then we zoomed in on an interesting story about a certain artist or the platform itself, just to dig a little bit deeper into that. And by first-time playlist ads, this can include, say with Spotify, which has a lot of user-generated playlists. So if someone's making a new playlist and they add your song that's a first time ad because it hasn't existed on that playlist before. But also, if you haven't been added to a certain playlist and you're getting that's editorial playlist, say, that has been around forever, and you get added to it for the first time, that's also a first time ad. So that's what we're counting here, and we did that to, instead of total playlist ads, because we wanted to get to less, theoretically less superstar acts, and also songs get added and removed all the time. So that's what we were filtering for and tracking here. So I think, so the first one we did was Spotify. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are all big legacy artists. Like Jay-Z's number 1, Kanye, Rihanna, Pharrell, Snoop. So this was kind of surprising to us, actually. But it does say something about the ad behavior on that platform in itself. So if you look at the playlist ecosystem here, the range is from like 18,000 to almost 24,000. And part of this is because Jay-Z brought his catalog back to Spotify after 2 years for his 50th birthday. But also, it's just people, these are the artists that people know, and they just continue to add them to their playlists, because the non-editorial playlist ecosystem on Spotify far surpasses the editorial ecosystem in terms of count, not necessarily in terms of reach. So it says something about, theoretically, it says something about listener choice. These are the artists that people continue to want to listen to and to playlist. I think we can go down to the next page. So we zoomed in on Jay-Z, who, like I mentioned, so obviously he founded Tidal, a rival streaming service. And to drive traffic there, he removed his catalog from Spotify, but for his 50th birthday, he brought it back after 2 years. So obviously that had something to do with him hopping into first place for this particular ranking. Here, when we zoom in, we're talking about playlist count. So we're not talking about first-time playlist ads. We're talking about total playlist count for Jay-Z on these graphs. And you can see just how many playlists he was on. It's pretty insane. And you can see the ratio between the total playlist count and the editorial playlist count, which tells you by a subtractive measure how many of these playlist ads were non-editorial playlist ads. It's because you can barely see the editorial playlist count area. And you can also see on the second graph the playlist follower reach. So based on how many followers each of these playlists have, what the theoretical total reach is of these playlists in a cumulative sense. So you can see how disproportionate the minimal amount of playlist counts to the reach that they have. So there might be a lot less of them, but they have more of a reach than the non-editorials, which there are way more of those, but they have, proportionally speaking, they have less reach. And you can see that editorials have about half of the reach of those non-editorials for Jay-Z throughout this time period, even though there were much, much less editorials, if that makes sense. So, moral of the story, editorials matter because they reach way more people, theoretically. And I think we can move on to the next section, which is Deezer. So Deezer, Tones and I, thanks to, like we mentioned, TikTok virality, came in first with 242 first-time playlist ads. Also, thanks to TikTok virality, DJ Regard came in number 4. So they really benefited from their tracks being added to a lot of TikTok videos, which you can see here. Number 2 was kind of surprising. It's this relatively unknown Brazilian rock band named Balara. And we can dig into that a little bit if we scroll down to the next page. So if we're talking just in terms of playlist count or playlist ads, Balara had a ton. But if you look at, so contrary to what we saw with Jay-Z, if you look at their playlist follower reach, if you scroll down to the second chart, Jason, their playlist, once they lost their single editorial ad, their playlist follower reach just essentially hit 0. So even if they were added to, over like 200 playlists, their reach was effectively nothing, which tells you that if you're just going by one metric, that can steer you in the wrong direction. You want to look at the relationship between multiple metrics to really give you a bigger picture of what's actually going on. Because this band might be on a million playlists, but if each playlist has 0 followers, then it's effectively like they are on no playlists. So that was something really interesting to see here, and a caveat to this ranking of first-time playlist ads. Let's move to the next platform, Apple. Again, you see Tones and I and DJ Regard. Tones and I hit number 1 again, and DJ Regard came in number 3, tying with DaBaby. Social House really benefited from their collab with Ariana Grande, as I'm sure anyone would. And then Lana Del Rey also made it in the top 5 with her new album, which I won't say here because it has a bad word in it, in case this is a family-friendly show.
Appreciate it. Yeah, we'll try and keep it PG-13 in everyone's best interest, but I'm sure that we can all look up the title.
Yeah. So she benefited from that, but she also benefited from a collaboration with Ariana Grande for Charlie's Angels, for the Charlie's Angels soundtrack. So clearly Ariana Grande it helps to have collabs with really big pop stars, obviously. So let's scroll down to look at DJ Regard's journey to the number 3 spot. So he, like we mentioned, he got big through TikTok as well. He remixed this Jay Sean track, Ride It, which came out in 2008. And I mean, he rode it to the top. It was just millions and millions of streams. Rolling Stone did a story on him as well. So we knew that because he had this TikTok popularity pretty much before his now label, Ministry of Sound, re-released the track to streaming services, it's sort of a no-brainer that it hit a lot of the big playlists immediately. So we wanted to track what exactly the journey was after those big playlists, like the we call them chart-based or time-based, so like the hits-based or the new music, and then the chart-based, like the top 100, etc. And so you can see that it started on a lot of these time-based playlists, like New Music Daily, Today's Hits 2020, and then it moved into the chart-based playlists, so top 100 regional playlists from, Turkmenistan, Malta, Finland, Papua New Guinea, just a wild range of these regional chart-based playlists. And then it moved into contextual playlists. So either activity-based or mood-based, which is interesting before it ultimately ended up on Pop Workout, which is interesting because it can be a way for you to think about how you can extend a track's longevity, because this track has long been removed from those time-based and chart-based playlists, obviously. But while people are distracted by the next TikTok viral hit, this song is still, generating streams on workout playlists or like happy hits playlists, or office DJ. So it's a way for it to have a life beyond virality, which was something that was really interesting for us to see there. And here on the very right-hand column of this chart, you can see the percentage overlap between each of these playlists and the ultimate destination playlist, Pop Workout. And this is from our playlist journeys feature, which gives you a sense of the playlist ecosystem in terms of what smaller playlists might feed into bigger playlists and even bigger playlists, and what happens after that, after they hit those big playlists. So feel free to check that out and play with that as well. Let us go to the final one, Amazon. So in our first 6MO report, we did our second section was largely looking at genre and geography distribution on the top playlists for each of these platforms, and we saw that country was really important. Both the American market and the country genre were both very important for Amazon. So the fact that two country pop crossovers, Maren Morris and Taylor Swift, obviously Taylor Swift has long crossed over, but Maren Morris really crossed over in the last 2 years or so. It really bolstered that point, because this is the only platform for the top 5 first-time playlist ads where you see a country-tinged artist come to the top. Other than that, it's very pop-based, Jonas Brothers, Ed Sheeran. But you also see a smaller amount of playlist ads, which part of that could be that this is based on the American storefront. But I think generally speaking, it's just going to be true that Amazon's playlist ecosystem is just a little bit smaller and maybe more editorially controlled than some of the others, Spotify especially. Let's dig into Maren Morris's. If you scroll down, Jason, to the next section. So we looked at Maren Morris's playlist count and we compared it to Taylor Swift's and Camila Cabello's for this 6-month period. And you can see how for Maren Morris on the left, so for Spotify, for Apple, for Deezer, her playlist count during this time period is essentially flatlined. Like, there's some variation, but it's, for all intents and purposes, it's pretty flat. Whereas for Amazon, the black line there, you can see it going essentially just healthily up. And that's super interesting because it tells you that Amazon's editors, because Amazon doesn't really have a non-editorial playlist ecosystem, Amazon's editors are choosing to continue to add Maren Morris songs to their playlists when other platforms maybe aren't necessarily doing that. So that tells you something about their editorial choices. And she is the most recent country pop crossover. So we're not saying that's definitively a relationship, but there is something there, I think. And if you compare it with the charts on the right, like with Taylor Swift, who crossed over many years ago, like a decade ago, probably, there's less of a dramatic climb, and even less for Camila Cabello. If you scroll up, her ads were the lowest for Amazon, actually. And yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview of part 2.
That's really interesting. And with Maren Morris as well, what I was seeing there, it looks like Amazon aren't shy to go back in and place a lot of catalog tracks in playlists. And of course, with Amazon Music being newer, that's only expected that they would be taking the time to actually go back and include those catalog tracks, whereas the other DSPs that have been around longer have been doing that over the past 10 plus years now, as crazy as that sounds when I say that out loud.
Right. I think another related to that is the Amazon smart speaker. If you think about the behavior with the smart speaker, it's largely catalog driven. Like, people are mostly going to be saying, hey, play this song I already know. So I think that makes sense as well, along the same lines.
Yeah, that's it. And it is really specific with, I can say Alexa because I don't have one connected right now. Always have to look around like she's listening, because she is. But exactly that. When I talk to any voice assistant, any smart speaker, I usually say exactly what I want. So I go, play this album by this artist, or play this artist, play their greatest hits from the 1990s. And fortunately, they've taken it to that level with voice that you can be that specific in your requests, which is really cool and unique. And it makes me feel that playlists aren't necessarily going to be the most requested feature with all of these smart speakers in the future. People will know what they want.
Right.
And then they'll be delivered similar music after that, instead of saying, hey, play the Jim Jams 2020 playlist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. It totally lines up.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good. Are there any questions maybe that we could go to, or is there anything you want to talk about, Mike?
You know what? It's funny. I did put the call out for questions, and most of the comments were just keep going, keep going. So I think people were just eager to hear everything that you guys had to say instead of trying to hold up the process with questions. So what we might do is, if it's okay with you, after this, we could perhaps invite people into the replay to leave questions in the comments, and then we can monitor that as well.
Sure.
Because not everyone in the world right now is awake. Some people may catch this later today. Some people may catch it the next day.
Yeah, makes sense.
Excellent. So
yeah,
I just want to say, I mean, we've still got a few other things we want to talk about here, but thank you to both of you so much, not just for putting this together. I can only imagine how much time went into this, but for also taking your time today to give such a I'm running out of words. Such a detailed breakdown of exactly how this information came together and where it came from and the research involved and why it's important and other ways that people can use this data and look at it, instead of just saying, oh, cool, here's something that I can post on Instagram to brag about, actually finding other uses for it as well, which is important.
Yeah. Real quick, just want to give a shout out to the amazing team that also worked on this. Michelle Yuen, who's a senior at New York University, who is a really talented analytics intern for us, also did a lot of research here with us. And then back in our HQ office in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area, Como Prabhu, and also our data scientists at UCSICO. They both helped immensely with getting us what Rucker and I needed. So I just want to give them a quick shout out too. So if you're looking to talk to like talented people, by all means, please contact them. You can click on here to go to their LinkedIn to make contact if you'd like.
Awesome. Cool. So you know what? We should get in a little plug for your podcast as well.
Yeah.
While we're at it.
For sure. Rucker, you want to talk about it? Or?
Yeah, so we have rolled out a new format this year. We interview, at the forefront of music and data every day. So you can find that. It's called How Music Charts. You can find it all across wherever podcasts are found. Spotify, Apple, all of it. And we're looking forward to having more guests. If you want to be a guest, feel free to reach out to us. We're always responsive on socials and email. And yeah, we look forward to chatting with you.
Awesome. And also, you guys are going to be at South by Southwest as well, as is, I think, more than half of the company. And you guys are hosting sessions yourselves as well? You're participating?
Yeah, part of the team's going to be in Austin, and so we're going to have one panel. It's going to be about the Trigger Cities concept that Chaz Jenkins, he's our chief commercial officer based in the UK, kind of coined many years ago, actually, but was the basis of the Trigger Cities series of blog articles that we had recently. So there's going to be a great panel. There's going to be a VP from Universal Music to talk about the stateside part of it. We have a Brazilian media, kind of Latin America specialist. He's based currently in Sao Paulo, Brazil, but is a very proud carioca from Rio de Janeiro, who can talk about the Latin American side. And then we also have someone from Warner Music, who is based in Singapore, to talk about a lot of the things that her and her team are working on in East Asia and Southeast Asia. So it's going to be a really cool panel about just kind of how all these different cities, such as Jakarta and Mexico City and Lima, Peru, and what else? What am I leaving out? Quezon City in the Philippines, which is funny because I'm Filipino American. It's really funny to see Quezon City in the talks of a lot of like labels nowadays, and about how all these different cities that have crazy streaming kind of consumption levels are just kind of potentially changing the way streaming platforms themselves function through their algorithms, because they're just listening to so much. And then we have a second panel that Komla, one of our main engineers, is putting on with Josh Hayes, a data scientist who worked on, for example, this cross-platform performance ranking system that I was talking about earlier in this particular live stream. They'll both be talking about kind of the technical side of things, whether you're a computer engineer or data scientist, and a lot of the challenges that happen with being a tech and data company in this music space, because if you've worked in the business, data has not been a very easy thing when it comes to, is this the right IRC attached to this UPC? There's 5 different versions of this song, including 3 remixes. There's a lot of kind of things on the metadata side that makes collection and organization and cleaning rather difficult, and how kind of we try to overcome those challenges. They'll be talking about that. And then Sung Cho, Chartmetric CEO and founder, and I as well will be there having mentor sessions as official South by Southwest mentors. So I think the list is out now. The sign up is out now. So I think we each get 5 spots each to do a little kind of like speed dating of sorts, in terms of if you want to talk about what it's like to start a startup, in the music space today. I think Sung would be a really great resource for that. And for me, if you want to talk about kind of storytelling in the music and data space, creating content when it comes to kind of like squeezing a lot of value out of music and data, or if you just want to talk about tacos, I am so willing to do that as well. But yeah, through those 3 things, we're going to be there, besides just, getting some barbecue and just enjoying the Austin weather. So we're looking forward to it.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to it as well. And what's that, sorry?
Excited to see you.
Yeah, I'm excited to catch up. It's crazy. I mean, we're all scattered all across the States right now, so it's nice to meet somewhere in the middle, basically. Right. Yeah. Look, aside from that, let's put up the link one more time here to the 6MO. Yes. Whoever came up with that is genius, because it made the URL
Jason.
so much shorter.
I was going to say anything, but okay, yeah.
Take it. Excellent. Well, look, before we wrap this up, is there anything else you guys would like to add? I know that we've been going for nearly an hour here, so I truly appreciate this. But if there's anything else you'd like to get in, now's your chance.
Rucker, you got anything?
Just if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Email. We're always responsive. We're always open to hearing new perspectives and criticisms. Anything. We're always trying to be better. So
Yeah, for
don't
sure.
hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, for all the Work Hard, Playlist Hard audience, if there's anything that you are curious about in terms of not only just this report or anything we do, or even just kind of the way we think about data and kind of where it belongs in the music space, because I know a really big conversation that has been going on for the past few years about this whole data versus gut thing. I think it's worth knowing because I think a lot of you are artists yourselves. Brooke and I also have music backgrounds, and we love music from a very kind of creative place, and I think and Mike as well. And I think that's really important to kind of stress is that we work, this is our job, but we definitely love seeing the combination of both. And I think hopefully if you're on the side of data is this, thing that is, antithetical to, this creative space, we beg to differ. We think there's a really, really happy marriage of both where they can help the business side and you can help free up your time to take advantage of data so you can write more songs and tour more. That's kind of what we try to do, and that's the space we try to occupy. So I think it's worth mentioning.
Awesome. Yeah, and it can be overwhelming for some people and it can be scary, and we're here to show you that doesn't have to be the case. It's actually really easy to understand. It's all about the way it's presented to you. And once you see some use cases, then you start to understand, okay, maybe I don't need to be checking my numbers every single day, but it's important to understand what they mean. So when I do check them, I'm not just looking at a number that's going up or down and beating myself up about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Mike, thanks for having us on, man.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Rutger, Jason, thank you so much. Truly appreciate your time, and I look forward to catching up at South by Southwest, getting some tacos, getting some barbecue, and just having some good quality, nerdy music chats.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it. I'm excited.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.